Is the audio okay?
कामि पतितवान् अनागारो परिपति कामभो परिक्षीणं तमहं भुवि
Yod is you
गाड़ी लगा
Yod kame kahantvan anagaro paribhajye. अनागार तो वजह थी आगार में नहीं रहता है, wanders around homeless. परिभज्य जिसमें renunciation हो गया, परिभज्य कामे कामनाओं का कहनवान is given of that. काम भव परिक्षीणन, जिसके sensual desires और भव desire for existence. काम भव परिक्षीणन, completely removed. So who in this world has renounced the desires, kame kahantvan, wanders around homeless, who has destroyed the desire for existence, means future existence. Or in my Hindu I call it now. The stories of again what is it? It's about a rich person के बेटा था जो monk बन गया और राजगृह में रहता था. तो उन्होंने एक कोर्टिजन को भेजा उसको टेम्प्ट करके वापस लाने के लिए. तो शी ऑफर्ड फूड टू हिम पहले तो एवरी डे, और एक दिन जब वो बच्चे बाहर खेल रहे थे तो उसको अपने घर में बुला लिया. एंड देन शी ट्राइड टू टेम्प्ट हिम कि मुझसे शादी कर ले. तो मॉम गॉट वेरी अलार्म्ड एंड रियलाइज्ड हिज मिस्टेक, मुझे अंदर नहीं जाना चाहिए था. बट बुद्धा न्यू दैट ही हैड नो बैड इंटेंशंस, सो ही स्पोक दिस वर्ड्स टू हिम. What should I say? He sent forth radiance. So वो get the ability to be there at many places. Monk heard this verse and became
योग तन्हा पहंतवान अनागारो परिबद्धे तन्हा भाव परिहं तमहं भूमि राम.
exactly similar है. Instead of kame, it is tanham. योग कामे पहनत्वान है, योग तन्हम पहनत्वान. काम भाव परिक्षीणन, तन्हा भाव परिक्षीणन. So sensual desire, it is talking about the tanha of Krishna. Basically here is translated as lust. So reasonably good translation. There are surprisingly two stories associated with this verse. One is about a past person of the earlier Buddha's time. Somebody had gave collected donations to build a stupa for him. तो वो एक को घर पे आया, वो मॉन्क मांग के, तो उसके जो गोल्ड स्मिथ था वो वाइफ से लड़ रहा था. जब वो आया तो उसने उसको डांट दिया. बाद में गलती महसूस हुई, सो ही वेंट एंड डोनेटेड गोल्ड फ्लावर्स फॉर दिस. तो वो आदमी इस जन्म में He is born as a son of a rich woman who has had an illicit affair. So when he is born, then he is put away. Now, it may sound very strange as a repercussion of that act. So a young woman, another person adopts him. And when he grows up, then he marries the daughter of a merchant and discovers a large amount of gold in his house. Because of that reason, the story says. And then he became, later on, he also became a monk and attained knowledge. So other monks still asked him, old Gavi attachment. He used to say that he doesn't, and then Buddha spoke this verse, confirming that this person attained knowledge. The second story associated with this is about a rich man named Jyotika. So he presented Ajatashatru with a great ruby. See the tragedy. Ajatashatru, on seeing the ruby, said, "ये तो बहुत अमीर होगा, तो इसको सारी wealth ले लेनी चाहिए." So he took all his wealth away. And later, when Ajatashatru killed the Bimsara, his father, and became the king, he tried to loot the palace of this merchant, but he was not successful. So he went to ask Buddha, how is it that I could not break into his palace? And he found this Jyotika was sitting in the monastery and listening to this course. So then he realized that it could not be done. He had a strong army which wealth could not be taken away. Later he became a monk and soon became an artist. Pitva Manu Sakham Yogam Jipam Yogam Upachakata Upachaka Sapa Yoga Visamulukam Tamham Purani Brahmanam. Next to है उसका भी सेम स्टोरी है मैं पढ़ देता हूँ. इत्वांग रतिंच अरतिंच सीति भूतं विरुपदे सब लोकाभिभुम वीरं कामहम ब्रूहि ब्राह्मणम. शुरू वाली सेम ही. इत्वांग मतलब जिसने छोड़ दिए हैं. मानुष कम योगम, योग से अटैचमेंट, जुड़ना. जिसने अटैचमेंट छोड़ दिया है टू मनुष्य का मतलब मनुष्य के ह्यूमन रेल्म के प्रति अटैचमेंट छोड़ दिया. दिव्यं रोग योगम अच्छक एंड ही इज आल्सो रिजन अबाउ द डिवाइन रेल्म. सो सब योग विषय सेपरेटेड फ्रॉम ऑल अटैचमेंट्स. He might call him Brahman. Second part is about arathing and rathing. Rathing means pleasure and arathing means displeasure. So when he is designed gone above both pleasure and unpleasure, means Siti Bhutam, beautiful word. Siti is a Shital. So one who has become cold from inside. Nirupadi is free from any upadhi, any attachment. Sab loka vibhum veeram. You see that veervan आदमी है जिसने सारे लोगों को काम करते हैं. The real brave person. He might call it that. The story is again similar to the other stories of this verse about a dancer who became a monk and attained arahantship. And one day while he was going, he saw some dancers. दूसरे monk पूछने लगे तेरा ही मन कर रहा है डांस करने का. So then they replied that he did not. And then Buddha spoke this verse confirming this person's statement that he was really free from attachment. आने वाली है, आने वाली प्रेजेंटेशन स्टिमुलस क्यों कर रहे हैं? स्क्रीन इधर जाएगा, इधर स्क्रीन बाहर जाएगा, ऐसा
वहीं से बाहर जा रहा है। हाँ, मेरे यहाँ से सर्वर पे जाएगा, क्योंकि भी कनेक्टेड है, सब कुछ दिखेगा।
Arpan, you are connecting from remote location? नहीं सर, उनको जहाँ पे जो भी आएगा वो उनको वहाँ दिख जाएगा। आपके यहाँ तो आ ही नहीं रहा, अभी उसने ऑन नहीं करा। रेगुलर करेगा। Slash, my voice is audible? Okay. Yeah, so instead of sharing the presentation, Rajesh will be directly reading from the book today. And he'll just share his screen, so possibly a few more minutes. Hmm? Shailesh, is it readable for you?
सब जाएगा आगे।
उसमें आ जाएगा। थोड़ा सा बड़ा स्क्रीन है।
फुल स्क्रीन तो लगी है,
सर क्यों क्वेश्चंस आंसर नहीं आ रहा? ऐसा खींच देना थोड़ा सा। ये नहीं खींच देना, खींचने का इसी में है, तो खींच जाता है। इसमें तुम उसकी टेक्स्ट की विड्थ बढ़ा दो, या इसको फॉन्ट बढ़ा दो, फॉन्ट बढ़ा देता है।
फॉन्ट बड़ा
अभी आया नहीं, रिफ्रेश नहीं,
फॉन्ट बढ़ा दो,
अब ठीक है। रीडेबल है। एक्चुअली इसकी राइटिंग इतनी बढ़िया है, बट रीडिंग इट इज एंजॉय। हाँ, मेरे पास तो किताब है, आप देखिए आपके वाला किताब।
We'll start with the third chapter. Name of chapter is the Great Stream. We seem to be like flies caught in honey, because life is sweet. We do not want to give it up, and yet the more we become involved in it, the more we are trapped, limited, and frustrated. We love it and hate it at the same time. We fall in love with people and possessions only to be tortured by anxiety for them. The conflict is not only between ourselves and the surrounding universe, it is between ourselves and ourselves. For intractable nature is both around and within us. The exasperating life, which is at once lovable and perishable, pleasant and painful, a blessing and a curse, is also the life of our own bodies. It is as if we were divided into two parts. On the one hand, there is this conscious I, at, at once intrigued and backward, the creature who is caught in the trap. On the other hand, there is me, and me is part of the nature, the wayward flesh with all its concurrently beautiful and frustrating limitations. I fancies itself as a reasonable fellow and is forever criticizing me for its perversity, for having possessions which got eye into trouble, for having passions which got eye into trouble, for being so easily subject to painful and irritating diseases, for having organs that wear out, and for having appetites which can never be satisfied. So designed that if you try to allay them finally and fully in a big burst, you get sick. So this is very similar to the divided mind thing that Rodney says. But he says in a
putting it in this natural life is another very problem. इसमें थोड़ा है ना between the spiritual and the division between spiritual and day-to-day life.
I don't understand the sentence. It says the exasperating life is at once lovable and perishable, pleasant and painful, a blessing and a curse, is also the life of our own body. The last is also the life of our own body.
जो हमारी जीवन with respect, I think as far as you can see, referring to the body as the usual way of identifying. Most of the body से identify करते हैं. And that is there its characteristics of sometimes pleasant, sometimes experience that pleasant, sometimes they're painful, sometimes we're the kind of experience we get is very lovable, but it doesn't last much. So the standard statement of human realm is like that. So I'm not sure what was your question?
Yeah,
Any sentence?
This is the exasperating life. So we started with life, and then we said is also the life of our own body. That was what.
हमारी body भी जो उसी
It's part of that.
it has same characteristics. Whatever is the characteristics of the mental phenomena, which give us sometimes pleasure, sometimes pain, same is true body also. It also gives us real experience through the body of great pleasure and great ecstatic pleasure sometimes, and quite a bit of it is painful.
Shailesh has a question. Is me the awareness here?
Is we trying to distinguish between I as the ego and me as the one which knows, wisdom part of it. हमारे में wisdom भी चलती रहती है ना, खासतौर पे जिसने थोड़ी बहुत साधना की है या इस तरह सोचता है कि राग द्वेष से दूर रहना चाहिए, बार बार राग लाग रहे हैं, कष्ट होता रहता है.
So I thought he was saying I as the ego and me as this body or the temptations of the body which get tempted away, and I am trying to correct it, or the mind which gets tempted away is part of me, and I is the ego is trying to correct it.
Me is being used as ego. Because I fantasizes itself as a reasonable fellow and is forever criticizing me for its perversity. So it uses in the both sense for having passions which get I into trouble. So using the term me as the flesh and I as the spirit in that traditional sense, or conscience, which tries to remind you again, superego if you want to, Freud's words, which keeps on reminding you, ये गलत कर दिया, यहाँ ऐसा करना था, ये नहीं किया.
So I think he is saying the me is the part which gets is autonomous, जो अपने आप से चीजें हमारी tendencies जो है
Instinctive
nature जो है, the body and the instinctive nature is part of me, and I is the reasonable fellow जो कहता है कि ये गलत हुआ, वो गलत हुआ.
I is the superego, is the kind of knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. This is question.
Perhaps the most exasperating thing about me, about nature and the universe, is that it will never stay put. It's like a beautiful river who will never be caught, and
Beautiful woman यार.
Woman.
beautiful
Sorry.
woman.
में river है क्या?
नहीं, beautiful a woman who will never be caught, and whose very flightiness is her charm. For the perishability and changefulness of the world is part and parcel of its liveliness and loveliness. This is why the poets are so often at their best when speaking of change, of the transitoriness of human life. The beauty of such poetry lies in something more than a note of nostalgia which brings a catch in the throat. Our revels now are ended. These are these are actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air, and like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yeah, all which it inherit shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, uh, leave not a rack behind. There is more in this beauty than the succession of melodious images, and the theme of dissolution does not simply borrow its splendor from the things dissolved. The truth is rather the images, though beautiful in themselves, come to life in the act of vanishing. The poet takes away its static solidity and turns the beauty which would otherwise be only statist and architectural into music, which no sooner than it is sounded dies away. The towers, palaces, and temples become vibrant and break from the excess of life within them. To be passing is to live, to remain and continue is to die. Unless a grain of corn falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it brings forth much fruit. For the poets have seen the truth that life, change, movement, and insecurity are so many names of the same thing. Here, if anywhere, truth is beauty, for movement and rhythm are the essence of all things lovable. In sculpture, architecture, and painting, the finished form stands still, but even so, the eye finds pleasure in the form only when it contains a certain lack of symmetry. When frozen in stone, as it may be, it looks as if it were in the midst of motion. Is it not, then, a strange inconsistency and unnatural paradox that I resist change in me and in the surrounding universe? For change is not merely a force of destruction. Every form is really a pattern of movement, and every living thing is like the river, which, if it did not flow out, would never have been able to flow in. Life and death are not two opposed forces, they are simply two ways of looking at the same force. For the movement of change is as much the builder as the destroyer. The human body lives because it is a complex of motions, of circulation, respiration, and digestion. To resist change, to try to cling to life, is therefore like holding your breath. If you persist, you kill yourself. In thinking of ourselves as divided into me and I and me, we easily forget that consciousness also lives because it is moving. It is as much a part of the and product of the stream of change as the body and the whole natural world. If you look at it carefully, you will see that consciousness, the thing that you call I, is really a stream of experiences, of sensations, thoughts, and feelings in constant motion. But because these experiences include memories, we have the impression that I is something solid and still like a tablet upon which life is writing a record. Yet the tablet moves with the writing finger as the river flows along the ripples, so that memory is like a record written on water. A record not of graven characters, but the waves turned into motion by other waves, which we call sensations and facts. The difference between I and me is largely an illusion of memory. In truth, I is of the same nature as me. It is part of the whole being, just as the head is part of the body. But if this is not realized, I and me, the head and the body, will feel at odds with each other. I, not understanding that it too is part of the stream of change, will try to make sense of the world and experience by attempting to fix it. We shall have a war between consciousness and nature, between the desire for permanence and the fact of flux. This war must be utterly futile and frustrating, a vicious circle, because it is a conflict between two parts of the same thing. It must lead thought and action into circles which go nowhere faster and faster. Which, for when we fail to see that our life is change, we set ourselves against ourselves and become like Ouroboros, the misguided snake who tries to eat his own tail. Ouroboros is the perennial symbol of all vicious circles, of every attempt to split our being asunder and make one part conquer the other. Struggle as we may, fixing will never make sense out of change. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, join join the dance. Religion, as most of us have known, has quite obviously tried to make sense out of life by fixation. It has tried to give this passing word a meaning by relating it to unchanging God, and by seeing its goal and purpose as an immortal life in which the individual becomes one with the restless nature of the deity. Rest eternal, changeless nature of the deity. Rest eternal grant unto them, O Lord, and let light perpetual shine upon them. Likewise, it attempts to make sense out of the swirling movement of history by relating them to the fixed laws of God, whose world endureth forever. We have thus made a problem for ourselves by confusing the intelligible with the fixed. We think that making sense out of life is impossible unless the flow of life events can somehow be fitted into a framework of rigid form. To be meaningful, life must be understandable in terms of fixed ideas and laws, and these in turn must correspond to unchanging and eternal realities behind the shifting scene. But if this is what making sense of out of life means, we have set ourselves the impossible task of making fixity out of flux. Before we can find out whether there is some better way of understanding our universe, we must see clearly how this confusion of sense and fixity has come about. The root of the difficulty is that we have developed the power of thinking so rapidly and one-sidedly that we have forgotten the proper relationship between thoughts and events, words and things. Conscious thinking has gone ahead and created its own world, and when it is found to conflict with the real world, we have a sense of profound discord between I, the conscious thinker, and nature. The one-sided development of man is not peculiar to intellectuals and brainy people, who are only extreme examples of a tendency which has affected our entire civilization. What we have forgotten is that thoughts and words are conventions, and that it is fatal to take conventions too seriously. Convention is a social convenience, as for example money. Money gets rid of inconveniences of barter. But it is absurd to take money too seriously, to confuse it with real wealth, because it will do you no good to eat it or wear it for clothing. Money is more or less static, or gold, silver, strong paper, or a bank balance can stay put for a long time. But real wealth, such as food, is perishable. Thus, a community may possess all the gold in the world, but it does not farm its crops. If it does not farm its crops, it will starve. In somewhat the same way, thoughts, ideas, and words are coins for the real thing. They are not the real thing, and though they represent them, there are many ways in which they do not correspond at all. As with money and wealth, so with thoughts and things, ideas and words are more or less fixed. There is real things change. It is easier to say I than to point to our own body, and to say want than to try to indicate a vague feeling in the mouth and stomach. It is more convenient to say water than to lead your friend to a well and make suitable motions. It is also convenient to agree to use the same word for the same things and to keep these words unchanged, even though the things are all indicating are in constant motion. In the beginning, the power of words must have seemed magical, and indeed, the miracles which verbal thinking has wrought have justified the impression. What a marvel it must have been to get rid of nuances of sign language and summon a friend simply by making a short noise, his name. So he says noise, which is very interesting, and he's using this noise word a lot. He's saying these words are just noises.
आजकल काफी इस पर रिसर्च हो रही है कि रोल ऑफ लैंग्वेज इन क्रिएटिंग द नोशन ऑफ आई
So,
we talk
प्रोनाउंस से यूज किए जा रहे हैं आई वी मी ही शी दे आर द troubles.
and he says this a lot that
He is one of the forerunners of all these thoughts processes.
he made it that way.
ऐसे talk है, I haven't heard it, but उसका title यही है कि how our language determines our thought. There's a talk on it. How different languages impact how people think in those cultures.
Japanese language में लोग कह रहे हैं there is no word for relaxation.
In Chinese language,
Japanese
good word.
ऐसा कोई word नहीं है leisure का इस तरह कोई word नहीं है.
It is no wonder that names have been considered uncanny manifestations of supernatural power, and that men have identified their names with their souls or used them to invoke spiritual forces. Indeed, the power of words have gone to man's head in more than one way. To define has come to mean almost the same thing as to understand.
Very beautiful.
More important still, words have enabled man to define himself, to label a certain part of his experience, I. This is perhaps the meaning of the ancient belief that the name is the soul. For to define is to isolate, to separate from complex of forms, from the stream of life and say, this is I. When man can name and define himself, he feels that he has an identity. Thus he begins to feel like the word, separate and static, or as over against the real, fluid nature of the word of nature. Feeling separate, the sense of conflict between man on the one hand and nature on the other begins. Language and thought grapple with the conflict, and the magic with which can summon a man by naming him is applied to the universe. Its powers are named, personalized, and invoked in mythology and religion. Natural processes are made intelligible because all regular processes, such as rotation of stars and seasons, can be fitted to words and ascribed to the activity of the gods or gods. The gods of God.
Activity of God.
छोटे-छोटे the real one.
The eternal word. At a later time, science employs the same process, studying every kind of regularity in the universe, naming, classifying, and making use of them in ways still more miraculous. But because it is the use and nature of words and thoughts to be fixed, definite, isolated, it is extremely hard to describe the most important characteristics of life, its movement and fluidity. Just as money does not represent the perishability and edibility of food, so words and thoughts do not represent the vitality of life. The relation between thought and movement is something like the difference between a real man running and a motion picture film which shows the running as a series of stills. We resort to the convention of stills whenever we want to describe or think what any moving body, such as train, stating that at such and such times it is at such and such places. But this is not quite true. You can say that a train is at a particular point now, but it took you some time to say now. And and during that time, however short, the train was still moving. You can only say that the moving train actually is. It means stops at a particular point for a particular moment, if both are infinitely small. But infinitely small points and fixed movements are always imaginary points, being denizens of mathematical theory rather than the real world. This is pretty powerful because we start to think we can plot time and do this and
उसकी एक इसी तरह की स्टेटमेंट मैंने से भी सुनी थी दलाई लामा से उनके ट्रेडिशन की रिगार्डिंग लिविंग इन द प्रेजेंट लिविंग इन द प्रेजेंट whenever we think what does the present mean 1 second half a second millisecond microsecond complicated just left it at that. So if you say 1 second, if you say millisecond, then there are 1,000 milliseconds in 1 second. Which of them is the now? So we try to break apart the whole notion.
it's most convenient for scientific calculations to think of
Geometry में भी वही problem है ना, points,
हाँ.
definition. It's a strange mystery, no? Point is something which does not have any space, occupy any space, but series of points make a line. क्या हो गया? So mathematicians and abstract mathematicians उसी चक्कर में घूमते रहते हैं कि वो कह रहा है. How is it that something which we define as having no
space.
position when joined together it makes it occupies space. How can zeros put together become one? No, it's something like that.
That is,
So to study mathematics, in a deep manner creates a mind-boggling phenomenon.
it is most convenient for scientific calculation to think of a movement as a series of very small jerks or stills. But confusion arises when the word described and measured by such conventions is identified with the word of experience. A series of stills does not, unless rapidly moved before our eyes, convey the essential vitality and beauty of movement. The definition, the description, leaves out the most important thing. Useful as these conventions are for purpose of calculation, language and logic, absurdities arise when we think that the kind of language we use or the kind of logic with which we reason can really define or explain the physical world. Part of man's frustration is that he has become accustomed to expect language and thought to offer explanations which they can't give. To want life to be intelligible in this sense is to want it to be something other than life. It is to prefer a motion picture film to a real running man. To feel that life is meaningless unless I can be permanent is like having fallen desperately in love with an inch. He is very small.
Words are simple, but used so powerfully.
Words and measures do not give life, they merely symbolize it. Thus, all explanations of the universe couched in language are circular and leave the most essential things unexplained and undefined. The dictionary itself is circular. It defines words in the terms of other words. So this is very powerful. When I read this, I said, very interesting way to look at it because you cannot define life because most of the things, as you take it to its basic level, will be defined in some other terms. And how children learn their basic words is through experiences, not through dictionaries. The dictionary comes a little closer to life when alongside some word it gives you a picture. But it will be noted that all dictionary pictures are attached to nouns rather than verbs. An illustration of the verb to run would have to be a series of stills like a comic strip. For words and static pictures can neither define nor explain emotion. Even the nouns are conventions. You do not define this real living something by associating it with the noise man. Again, the noise. When we say this, pointing with the finger is a man, the thing to which we point is not man. It is clear we should have said this is symbolized by the noise man. What then is this? We do not know. This is to say, we cannot define it in any fixed way, though in another sense we know it as our immediate experience, a flowing process without a definable beginning or end. It is convention alone which persuades me that I am simply this body bounded by skin in space, and by birth and death in time. Where do I begin and end in space?
So the word we use, convention alone persuades me. Beautiful word.
Where do I begin and end in space? So this is very similar to the
Modern
thing.
science. He knew about quantum theory also. He talked about it in later poetry.
In science and humanism, you mentioned that our body
Constantly
constantly.
ऑक्सीजन ले रही है, सेल्स बाहर जा रहे हैं. If you see the molecular structure, the atoms of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, they are going out from our body through breath, through respiration, through pores, and then what is coming in is from the trees, from the chair, from the furniture. They are also degenerating, तो उसके जो molecules निकल के आ रहे हैं, बदल जा रहे हैं. It's quite a task. मुझे ना किसी की ऐसी विजन हो जाए कि सब चीजें दिखने लग जाए, you get crazy. You totally get crazy.
I have relations to the sun and air, which are just as vital parts of my existence as my heart. The moment in which I am a pattern of convolution began incalculable ages before the conventionally isolated event called birth, and will continue long after the event called death. Only words and conventions.
Suresh is saying this discussion is making me dizzy.
Saying something else. Only words and conventions can isolate us from the entirely undefinable something which is everything. Now, these are useful words, so as long as we treat them as conventions and use them like the imaginary lines of latitude and longitude, which are drawn upon maps, but are not actually found upon the face of Earth. But in practice, they are all bewitched by words. We confuse them with the real world and try and live in the real world as if it were the world of words. As a consequence, we are dismayed and dumbfounded when they do not fit. The more we try to live in the world of words, the more we feel isolated and alone. The more all the joy and liveliness of things is exchanged for mere certainty and security. On the other hand, the more we force to admit that we actually live in the real world, the more we feel ignorant, uncertain, and insecure about everything. But there can be no sanity unless the difference between these two worlds is recognized. The scope and purpose of science are woefully misunderstood when the universe which it describes is confused with the universe in which man lives. Science is talking about a symbol of the real universe, and this symbol has much the same use as money. It is a convenient time saver for making practical arrangements, but when money and wealth, reality and science are confused, the symbol becomes a burden. Similarly, the universe described in formal dogmatic religion is nothing more than a symbol of the real world, being likewise constructed out of verbal and conventional distinctions. To separate this person from the rest of the universe is to make a conventional separation. To want this person to be eternal is to want the words to be reality. And to resist that a convention endure for forever and ever. We hunger for the perpetuity of something which never existed. Science has destroyed the religious symbol of the world because when symbols are confused with reality, different ways of symbolizing reality will seem contradictory. The scientific way of symbolizing the world is more suited to utilitarian purpose than the religious way. But this does not mean that it has any more truth. It is truer to classify rabbits according to their meat or according to their fur. It depends on what you want to do with them. The clash between science and religion has not shown that religion is false and science is true. It has shown that all systems of definition are relative to various purposes and that none of them actually grasp reality. And because religion has been misused a means as a means for actually grasping and possessing the mystery of life, a certain measure of debunking was highly necessary. And science has again
Done that. Now science needs to work.
uh But in the process of symbolizing the universe in this day, or for that, or that for this purpose, or that we seem to have lost the actual joy and meaning of life itself. All the various definitions of the universe have had ulterior motives, being concerned with the future rather than the present. Religion wants to assure the future beyond death, and science wants to assure it until death, and to postpone death. But tomorrow and plans for tomorrow can have no significance at all unless you are in full contact with the reality of the present. Since it is in the present and only in the present that you live, there is no other reality than present reality. So that even if one were to live for endless ages, to live for the future would be to miss the point everlastingly. But it is just this reality of the present, this moving vital now, which eludes all the definitions and descriptions. Here is the mysterious real world which words and ideas can never pin down. Living always for the future, we are out of touch with the source and center of life, and as a result, all the magic of naming and thinking has come to something of a temporary breakdown. The miracles of technology cause us to live in a hectic clockwork world which does violence to human biology, enabling us to do nothing but pursue the future faster and faster. Deliberate thought finds itself unable to control the upsurge of the beast in a man, a beast more beastly than any creature of the wild, maddened and exasperated by the pursuit of illusions. Specialization in verbiage, classification, and mechanized thinking has put man out of touch with many of the marvelous powers of instinct which govern his body. It has furthermore made him feel utterly separate from the universe and his own me. And thus, when all philosophy has dissolved in relativism and can make fixed sense of the universe no longer, isolated I feels miserably insecure and panicky, finding the real world a flat contradiction to its whole being. Of course, there is nothing new in this predicament of discovering the ideas and words cannot plumb the ultimate mystery of life, that reality or, if you will, God cannot be comprehended by the finite mind. The only novelty is that the predicament is now social rather than individual. It is widely felt, not confined to the few. Almost every spiritual tradition recognizes that a point comes when two things must happen. Man must surrender his separate feeling I and must face the fact that he cannot know that is define the ultimate. These traditions also recognize that beyond this point there lies a vision of God, which cannot be put into words, and which is certainly something utterly different from perceiving a radiant gentleman on a golden throne or a little flash of blinding light. They also indicate that this vision is a restoration of something which we once had and lost because we did not or could not appreciate it. This vision is then the unclouded awareness of this undefinable something that we call life, present reality, the great stream, the eternal now, an awareness without a sense of separating from it. The moment I name it, it is no longer God. It is man, tree, green, black, red, soft, hard, long, short, atom, universe. One would readily agree with any theologian who deplores pantheism that these denizens of the world of verbiage and convention, these sundry things conceived as fixed and distinct entities, are not God. If you ask me to show you God, I will point to the sun or to a tree or a worm. But if you say, you mean then the God is the sun, the tree, the worm, and all other things, I shall have to say that you have missed the point entirely. Comments?
Great stream.
Slee Sharpan, any questions?
Arpan is off the ground.
ये वाला पैराग्राफ है और these traditions, last जहाँ पे किया है ना, वो this stream is talking about. You know which place.
These traditions also recognize that beyond this point there lies a vision of God which cannot be put into words and which is certainly something utterly different from perceiving a radiant gentleman on a golden throne or a little flash of blinding light. They also indicate that this vision is a restoration of something which we once had and lost because we did not or could not appreciate it.
This last one. This is the vision that he's saying.
This vision is then the unclouded awareness of this undefinable something, which we call life, present reality, the great stream, eternal now, an awareness without the sense of separation from it. That is what we say vision of God. Defining vision of God as unclouded awareness.
The Slee has the question. Idea is not to get caught up in a convention, but rely on experience.
But experience needs to be seen wisely or interpreted wisely. That is a very important issue. If you don't interpret it wisely, we'll just ignore the meaning of it. Because experience तो हम करेंगे world को. We don't see it as a stream of life. We see it as individual entities. My life, your life. Sometimes you get those if you study and reflect deeply. If there's no one here, whatever is going on. You can see these various streams are moving around. Streams of life are moving around. But eventually all those streams are all manifestations of a life. It's just for the sake of convention we say that there are different streams.
So in reality, there is no.
जैसे देखते हैं ना वो होता है ना, you go from a top of a mountain, you look at the world sometime, or top of building कोई 50 story building चले जाओ, 10 पे चले जाओ, look at the things below, world looks quite different. हवाई जहाज से जैसे उतरते हैं, जब कई बार वो 2 level पे चलता है, you see people moving like kind of बच्चे से खेलते हैं ना उस पर बहुत वीडियो गेम होती है जैसे तो ऊपर से ऐसा लगता है जब कारें आ रही हैं इधर जा रहा है यहीं जा रहा है आदमी जा रहा है from the top when you look at it all these big things जमीन पे तो लगता होगा कहाँ फंस गए ट्रैफिक जैम में केस में कि उसमें गाड़ी नहीं चलाई जा रही ये नहीं हो रहा वो नहीं हो रहा उससे देखते हैं पॉइंट यहाँ से वहाँ जा रहा है इट जस्ट मूविंग अराउंड you get a different vision altogether when you see it from the top. And I think that's the reason that people feel so good when going on the mountain tops. धरती के जो चक्कर हैं वो दिखते नहीं है वहाँ से और दिखते भी हैं तो you see a different vision altogether. So the Krishna is really seeing that to see the whole world as a manifestation of life, which it is really. To abide in that understanding. It's freedom. There is no individuality notion. You see the whole world as a manifestation of life. It is really, every moment, at every place there is consciousness. We know from science now, every place, every inanimate object also has some great motion and impermanence within it. Even mountains will finish. 2 minutes of earthquake in Nepal has shown that even mountains can finish. Just like this, in a flash we can go. So, but we can't really, we're not in a position to keep that so that unclouded awareness. There are unclouded awareness. Thoughts make everybody.
But then the problem happens is that our attempts also to comprehend create probably the limitation, more limitation.
We try to comprehend intellectually, it's a mushkil hai. Right. That's why we need for calming down and quieting down, getting an intuitive awareness of intuitive awareness. You directly get a feel of it, you can't explain it. This last one, if you ask me what to show God, I'd gone to a sun or a tree or a worm. And if you tell me you think the God is the sun, obviously you're then associating it with entity, not with the reality behind all of them. I have to say that you missed the point entirely. See, you just push it in a manner very, very interesting. This reminds me of this, I'm not sure if you were there in one of the sessions by school में शिक्षा principal was having this orientation session and she said sorry, that not in that, but in the fourth day or fun day, she would say please see your children live and cherish the moments rather than see them through your 5-inch screens. Because almost everybody is trying to record what the children are doing, and she's saying you are missing the point. You're trying to create a memory at this point rather than enjoying this point. I really like that. She said, put your phones out, see the energy of your children live. But we're all bothered about best shot मिल जाए और best video बन जाए.
All the parents trying to find the best spot to catch the best.
सब लोग क्या में क्या करते हैं वो बार-बार encourage करती है कि छोड़ो सब साइड में रखो और देखो अपने बच्चों को खेलते हुए. And that's what normally we do when we go out also.
Holidays
पे जो हम जाते हैं.
birthdays पे
Rather than living there and enjoying the experience, we're trying to create a memory.
Shailesh Sharpan, any more questions before we close the session?
Sharpan कहाँ है? पूछिए इस क्लास में।
Sharpan, where are you connecting from?
मैंने कहा
Where on Rajasthan?
There or not? भाई मेरे से नहीं आया ना, बीच में आया ना।
Sharpan, are you there? Where are you connecting from? You're at Gurgaon or some remote location? Outskirts of Jaipur. Okay, then we'll close the session for the day.
We'll have the tea session.
We'll have the tea session.
We only can see it.